Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And this week on the Quarterdeck, we're going to continue our reading of our book, With the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy. And this week, we're going to talk about Leggos. Yes, that is correct. We're going to talk about how the division used Leggos to rehearse the operation that they were planning once they headed into Baghdad. This week in our hero highlights, we will take a look at the patriotism, the heroism of Private First Class Harold Gonzalez, United States Marine Corps, and what he did to earn himself the nation's highest award, the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Drop and give me 25. I'm the gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The Quarterdeck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarterdeck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Signs.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The Quarterdeck. Being on active duty can sometimes mean that you're going to have a hectic, ridiculous long day, and sometimes you just don't even know what's going to be in store no matter what type of day you're actually going to have once you go into work. Whether you're deployed, you're back in garrison, or whatever the heck you're doing, that is just the way that it's going to be because you really have no idea or no way of planning or determining exactly how things are going to happen. This is so very true, but I really didn't think about it until just the other day when I was sitting here and thinking. You know, Marines kind of have a schedule. We have a schedule that we maintain. The things that we do, we know when we're going to PT. We know when we're going to go to the field. We know when we're going to go train. If we're deployed in a combat environment, we have our daily routines that we do and kind of helps us to maintain our sanity because we have other Marines that are there with us or other service members that are going through the exact same thing that we're going through. So it makes it a little bit easier because we have someone to lean on, I guess you can say. You know, we have that person to be there. And then I was thinking about it for a second. There's many deployments that as I've gone on when I was on active duty, and I never really sat there and thought about the Marine wife, you know, my spouse. What did she really go through when I was gone? Because military spouses have to pretty much step into their own fight while the service members are deployed because now they're responsible for everything. They're the ones that had to deal with anything regarding the kids, the house, the bills, all those things that are just pretty much just thrown at them. And they're expected to be successful and succeed and complete everything back home while their military service member is deployed off into some combat environment or wherever the heck they may be. How stressful can that really be? You know, never really sat down and thought about it, but I came across the other day. I was going through and doing some research regarding military spouses, in particular the Marines, the Marine wife in particular. And I found a poem about the Marine wife. And this was submitted by Crafty Jewels. They're the ones that did that, and it was written by Alexandra Benakis. And it goes like this. A Marine wife has so much to bear. She's everything at once. No one could compare. When God made her, he had perfection in mind. For nowhere on earth is another of her kind. She leads a life not many would choose, for her job is the hardest in the military to do. She is courageous and strong, one would say made of steel. But way deep down is a heart that can feel. She stands by her husband, so proud, so tall, and waits many nights by the phone for a call. She's mommy and daddy all rolled into one. She'll never rest easy until her job is done. She sits all alone, and in silence she cries. Did I do a good job? Is my family all right? But deep in her heart, she knows that it's true. God is right beside her, helping her through. If you think about this for a second, Alexander Banakis, the person that wrote this poem, she nailed it. She completely nailed it because a Marine wife, but the same way goes to across all the other services, you know, the military spouse, I'll say, but I don't care. I'm going to stick to the Marine wife. They go through so much. They bear everything. They deal with everything. They make the choices and everything that they have to do at home when they're left there to burden everything that is now being put into their laps because they're the ones that are there maintaining the household when their loved one is not there. So this poem really stood out to me, and I've seen it before in the past, but I never really paid it no mind. I really didn't pay attention to exactly what it said. But this week when I was looking at everything that a military spouse goes through, it kind of hit home a little bit, and it made me realize exactly all the things that they actually have to deal with when the service member is gone. So with that being said, as we move closer and closer now into May, Mother's Day is coming up. And that's another thing that we have to take advantage of to help celebrate the mothers of our children, to appreciate everything that they do every single day into our household. Now, I am one as well that I sometimes take for granted everything that my wife does and the things that she does around the house. And that is not pre-planned. Believe it or not, I'm not planning, not showing, my affection as far as for everything that she does around the house. I know what she does around the house. Without her, there is no possible way that the house is going to be ran the way that it's ran right now. I mean, I remember there was a time when she got sick. She had bronchitis, and she was in bed for a week. Me and my son almost starved to death. We were pretty much starving. I think we lost like 10 pounds that week. I'm just kidding. We didn't lose weight, but it was hard. Man, I can't even fathom everything that she does here at the house that I don't even realize or pay attention to the things that she does because it goes unnoticed. I really don't pay attention to it because I'm just so used to having her do everything that she does. And my son's the exact same way. We are just so used to we getting home from school, from work, whatever, and lunch is already made for us. We sit down, we eat, and then our clothes are already washed for us. They're folded. We just put them away. And I'm not saying we're taking advantage of our loved one, but, I show great appreciation. Thank you to my wife and all the military spouses out there that do such a great and wonderful job for the things that you do. So this month in May, we're going to celebrate the military wife in our podcast anyway. We'll celebrate the military spouse. And don't forget that Mother's Day is coming up to go ahead and get out there and start preparing your Mother's Day gift for your kids, for your loving wife. Are you looking for a photographer who can capture the most important moments in your life? Look no further than Miguel Saenz Photography. Miguel Saenz is an award-winning photographer with a passion for capturing the beauty and emotions of weddings, family portraits, and special events. With years of experience and a creative eye, Miguel Saenz will create stunning images that you'll treasure for years to come. Whether you're looking for a traditional wedding album, a unique family portrait, or a professional headshot for your business, Miguel Saenz Photography has the expertise to bring your vision to life. From the initial consultation to the final product, Miguel Saenz will work with you every step of the way to ensure that your images reflect your unique style and personality. Don't settle for mediocre photographs that simply document an event. Trust Miguel Saenz Photography to create timeless images that capture the essence of your special moments. Book your session today and experience the magic of Miguel Saenz Photography. Visit Miguel Saenz Photography online at miguelsaenzphotography.com to see examples of his work and schedule your appointment today.
What we're gonna do right here is go back. Way back into time.
Last week in our reading of our book, With the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy, we talked about how the division was preparing themselves to actually operate in the cities of Iraq, going house to house, in a combat environment that had not been done since way back in Vietnam timeframe. And what we have to remember and understand is that there were not very many Marines still on active duty that had ever been in any kind of a combat environment. So they brought individuals that had been in this kind of environment to actually talk to the Marines, to the leadership to prepare them to ensure that they understood that eventually this was going to happen. The Marines were going to have to go house to house to find actual individuals that were hiding amongst the regular people in all of these cities. And since the Iraqi forces were planning to use this as an advantage to them, to force the division to head into the cities and allow them to fight in some kind of an urban environment, their mentality was that they were going to have an advantage against the division because it was their home turf. So this week now, let's get into how the division rehearsed using Legos to prepare them for this fight that was going to be ahead of them as soon as they headed into country. While the Division Forward CP made its way to Commando Camp in November, planning efforts continued in CONUS to ready the rest of the division for deployment. The remaining G3 staff members, led by the Deputy G3, Lieutenant Colonel Clark Lethan, began to formulate a plan for the first tactical movement exercise that would affectionately become known as the Lego drill. The tactical ground movement required during this coming fight presented a particular challenge to the division. The restrictive terrain would limit the travel to existing roads for much of the battle space. Self-inducted friction caused just by moving the divisions over 5,000 vehicles and more than 20,000 personnel over the restricted avenues of approach would be severe. Enemy actions could only make this situation worse, since reliefs in place or convoy reconfiguration on the fly would induce even more friction. They would be nearly impossible. Careful attention had to be paid to organization for combat, convoy configurations, and battlefield circulation planning. If something was likely to be required at the point of attack, its place of the convoy would have to be established early so it would be able to employ forward rapidly. Engineering assets, NBC decontamination equipment, communication gear, artillery, and logistic support, just to name a few, all jockeyed for position in the column. The potential for traffic jams to seriously impact the division's tempo and to put lives at risk at bottled up choke points made rehearsals necessary. Doing these on scale that would allow the division to visualize the challenges were problematic. The CG presented the staff with an idea to help the division imagine its way through this challenge. Inspired by a local Southern California attraction, the CG decided using toy Lego blocks to represent every vehicle in the division would be a fine way to visualize the maneuver challenges. Using these plastic blocks on an appropriately scaled terrain model would give an appreciation to all the commanders of the challenges posed by moving massive numbers of vehicles down the limited roads available. Legos were available in a variety of sizes and were color-coded as well. Specific colors and sizes would be assigned to a unit's vehicles. Then the blocks would be attached to the corresponding plates that would represent each of the units in the division. A scaled terrain model was built to replicate the major terrain features in southern Iraq to include the enemy order of battle, avenues of approach, objectives, and existing control measures. For the drill, each battalion walked its scheme and maneuver, moving their Lego pieces in a proper sequence, limited by traffic flow and movement rates dictated by the conditions. This allowed the staff, commanders, and operations officers to imagine through the sequence of movements for the division and its supporting units, allow them to gain understanding of the battle space, and provide a form to validate the current task organization. It also identified potential friction points and helped establish priorities of movement according to the desired sequence of each RCT. The drill also helped forecast the divisions that they would be ready to assume battle space from the RCTs and turn it over to the relieving forces. Heading the toy department were Lieutenant Colonel Rob Witters and Lieutenant Colonel Steve Santa Anna, who bought over 6,000 Lego blocks to depict most of the division's vehicle pool and those of supporting attachments. The G3 and the G4 began to supervise the task of assembling the entire divisional task organization, one vehicle at a time. Putting an entire division together in this manner presented the opportunity for each RCT to gain in-depth understanding of the size and composition of their planned attachments, supporting units and other forces on the battlefield. The RCTs gained collectively understanding of just how massive a full Marine division was, and how dawn out of the convoy would be over the limited road network through the muddy terrain of southern Iraq. This drill foreshadowed the complexity of the challenges posed by the division's plan to run up an unexpected avenue of approach over terrain that even the enemy questioned as trafficability. The Lego drill also commended a tactical belief that forward passages of lines must be avoided at almost any cost in order to maintain the tempo. The first Lego drill took place on 5 December 2002 in front of the division CP. The palm-shaded parade deck in front of the White House offered the perfect setting for the 1st Marine Division to rehearse yet another action against the nation's foes. Even if the security issues posed by the outdoor settings were difficult to deconflict, accomplishing meaningful training while also practicing good operational security, or OPSEC, were difficult missions to reconcile throughout the preparation of the rehearsal phases. The G2 constructed a scaled terrain model of the southern Iraq using athletic field chalk, and commanders at all levels attended. The drill was successful in depicting the challenges the division faced, and graphically demonstrated some of the particular choke points that would slow the division's rapid pace. Questions on the battle space management were discussed and answered. For each traffic jam of plastic blocks, the training audience was forced to ask itself, who owns this battle space? Where exactly are the boundaries? Who will act as the referee when fog and friction come into play? The team-generated answers to these questions were to greatly facilitate the division's movement when it executed the same plan with real M1A1s, AAVs, and MTVRs, the 7-ton trucks. A second Lego drill was held on 10 January at Camp Pendleton's LZ Horno. The audience, much larger this time, included key personnel from the division, its supporting units, and higher headquarters. By this time, the plan had gone through several refinements in Kuwait. The CG again flew back from the forward CP in Kuwait to attend the important training event, and took Lieutenant Colonel Paul Uriah Kennedy to lead planner with him. Together, they walked the audience through the most recent changes in the operational plan. The battle space, task organization, and sequencing of the opening gambit had all been recently defined by the planning staffs in Kuwait, and were now briefed to the division and regimental staffs at large. RCT commanders back-briefed the CG on their understanding of the scheme and maneuver. This second drill allowed for a common understanding of all the refinements that had taken place at that point, and allowed members of the supporting adjacent staffs to visualize their own role in the upcoming fight. These drills shaped the actions that would take place in the ground in Iraq in a few short months. For example, as the collective members of the MACTAF team talked through the sequence and the integration of assault supports, Lieutenant Colonel Bradley Lowe, the Marine Aircraft Group 39, MAC 39, operations officer, brought up the fact that the AH-1s were oriented to the east in their support of RCT-7's attack on the 51st Mechanized Division, should have held out longer than anticipated and was still fighting at dawn. This presented a particular challenge, as the pilots would be attacking into the morning sun. The division's plan was changed accordingly, with the addition of the 3rd LAR supporting attack from the southern to operate the corridor for the Cobras, allow them to orientate to the northwest, mitigating the blinding effect of the sun. Although a great value, the scale of the Lego drills was very small, making it difficult for spectators to identify the players. For detailed attack planning, the scale was appropriate. For visualizing the operation as a whole, however, it was confusing for the spectators once the players began to move their tiny pieces on the vast terrain model. In order to keep of the difficult players were in need to personalize each team on the field. Captain Warren Cook, the CG's aide, came up with an idea to use color and number-coded jerseys to represent the elements of each RCT. Each RCT team would take the field in its own color, and subordinate battalions would wear the number that corresponded with their own battalion identifier. Example of that would be 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, would wear RCT's 5's color with the number 35. A similar scheme was established for the independent battalions and supporting elements. Captain Cook would have a number of brilliant suggestions throughout planning and combat operations that would have a significant influence on the division's success. Much more than an aide, he was a trusted advisor for the CG and the member of the staff. The division's staff hurriedly purchased colored t-shirts, and Lieutenant Colonel Lethan hand-carried them all the way to the forward CP in Kuwait. The first jersey drill would take place in LSA Matilda during February. Leggos. Can you guys believe that? The division used Leggos to allow them to actually visualize, so the commanders would have an understanding and an idea of how the maneuver was going to take place once they headed into Iraq. And they were talking about how the terrain was going to play a big role and how the division was going to head into Baghdad, and that it would slow down their fast movement from Kuwait as they headed all the way into Baghdad. And this was so true, because traffic jam wasn't even the word to actually say this, because going down Highway 1 was a freaking nightmare. I can remember that we were stopped in place for more than an hour, sometimes two. We were just sitting there waiting for the division to be able to pass through certain corridors of that highway and make its way to where they needed to go. And, to me and a lot of the other Marines, we were like, oh, hell no, we're just sitting ducks, sitting waiting here on the side of the road, because they can easily do indirect artillery fire and take out the whole friggin' division, because we're all just stopped here waiting to actually move. Now, with these Lego drills, a lot of these things were avoided. However, whenever you plan something, we all know that not everything that you're planning is going to go according to that plan. Things are going to change. You're going to have to make choices on the fly. And these choices are going to affect a lot of people, especially in the units, especially in the Marines. The way it goes, you make a choice as a leader, that choice is going to be the choice that you make. And sometimes it can be a great choice. And sometimes it's just a choice that just does not work. The plan goes straight to shit. And now you have to come up with something else on the fly. And that's what the division was doing with these Lego drills. They were taking all the questions, what if? What if this? What if that? And they were coming up together with an answer collectively with all the commanders. So hopefully all these things could actually be avoided once the division actually headed all the way into country. Next week, we're going to talk about NBC rehearsals, or in other words, nuclear, biological, and chemical rehearsals, and how the division was going to prepare. Because the whole thing, when the division got into country, they were looking for weapons of mass destruction, especially chemical weapons that Saddam Hussein and his regime had in place in country. So that's what they were going to work on and do rehearsals to prepare the division to ensure that they were ready in the event, not if, but when they actually used these kinds of weapons against the division as they were moving forward to head into Baghdad. So again, next week we'll look at that, and we'll continue with our reading of our book and focus on how the division is continuing to prepare every single day to get the division ready to go out there and win the fight. Hero Highlight. This week in our Hero Highlights, we take a look at the story of the heroism of Private First Class Harold Gonsalves, United States Marine Corps, and what he did in order to earn him that Congressional Medal of Honor. Harold Gonsalves was born in Alameda, California on 28 January 1926. He attended high school at Alameda, and after 2.5 years of high school, quit to take a job as a stock clerk with Montgomery Ward in a company in Oakland, California. In high school, he had taken part in football, basketball, track, and swimming, besides singing tenor in the school glee club. The 5'9", 178-pound Californian enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve on 27 May 1943 and was called to active duty on 17 June. He went through recruit training at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, California, and then, at his own request, was sent to the Raiders at Camp Pendleton, California. After 3 weeks with them, he was transferred to the artillery at the same camp. he was classified as a cannoneer on 75 and 105 millimeter guns before he joined the 30th Replacement Battalion in the fall of 1943. Private Gonsalves left the United States on 8 November and at the end of the month was assigned to the 2nd Pack Howitzer Battalion, which was then in Hawaii. He was promoted to Private First Class in March of 1944, and with his battalion, became part of the 22nd Marines 2 months later. With the 22nd Marines, he participated in the assault, capture, and occupation of Angibi and Perry Islands in the Marshall Islands. At Angibi, the Marines took the island in 6 hours, killing more than 1,000 of the enemy. The regiment was cited by Major General Thomas E. Watson, commanding general of the Tactical Group 1, for their part in the Marshall's campaign. From Eniwetok, PFC Gonsalves accompanied the 22nd Marines in Kwajalein and Guadalcanal, back to Kwajalein and Eniwetok, then up to Guam in July, where he took part in the liberation of the pre-war American island. After Guam, the regiment went back to Guadalcanal, where in November they were detached from the 22nd Marines and joined the 15th Marines and the 6th Marine Division. It was with that outfit that PFC Gonsalves landed on Okinawa on 1 April of 1945. 2 weeks later, on 15 April, the 19-year-old Marine was a member of an 8-man forward observer team, which was engaged in directing artillery fire in support of an attack by the infantry on Japanese positions on Motabu Peninsula. When it finally became necessary for the team to advance to the actual front lines, the officer in charge took PFC Gonsalves and one other man with him. PFC Gonsalves was acting scout sergeant of the team. He and the other Marine were to lay telephone lines for the communications with the artillery battalion. As the team advanced to the front, they were brought under heavy enemy rifle, grenade, and mortar fire. Just as the three had reached the front lines, a Japanese grenade landed amongst them. It was less than a foot from the two Marines and PFC Gonsalves. Without a moment of hesitation, he flung himself on the deadly missile, taking the full explosion into his own body. He gallantly gave his life for his fellow Marines and his country. The other two were not even touched by grenade fragments, and they successfully completed their mission. The Medal of Honor with citation signed by President Harry S. Truman was presented on 19 June 1946 to PFC Gonsalves' sister in the presence of his parents at ceremonies in the office of the commanding general in the Department of the Pacific, Major General Henry L. Larson, United States Marine Corps, in San Francisco, California. Following the war, PFC Gonsalves' remains were returned to the United States for reinterment. He was buried with full military honors in the Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, California, 20 March of 1949. The quarterdeck. Oh my, we covered so many things this week on the quarterdeck. We talked about how the division was using Leggos to allow them to actually rehearse and understand the actual movement of the vehicles in the routes that they were going to be taking once they actually headed into Iraq and started moving towards Baghdad. Who'd ever thought that a piece of plastic, a piece of little things that they used to create so many things at Legoland down there in Carlsbad near Camp Pendleton, California, was going to mean so much to the actual 1st Marine Division in their planning process. Our book is starting to get really good. We're starting to get into the meat and potatoes of what actually is going to happen with all these rehearsals. Rehearsal. Perfect practice is going to make the division perfect in everything that they're going to be doing and what they're going to conduct once they actually get into country. In our hero highlights this week, we talked about Private First Class Harold Gonsalves and what he did to earn himself that Congressional Medal of Honor. And it's just truly amazing how so many young men during the World War II era jumped on hand grenades in order to save their fellow Marines that were around them. It just goes to show that the Marines have not changed very much since that time frame, because Marines ultimately care more about their fellow Marines, their brothers and sisters that are around them than their own life, that they would selflessly give their own life away in order to save them. Next week, we're going to look at Sergeant Ross F. Gray of the United States Marine Corps and his story. What the heck did he do? A simple boy from Alabama. What did he do to earn himself the Congressional Medal of Honor? A reminder to all our listeners, new and old, thank you so much for listening to the Quarterdeck and allowing our numbers of listeners to increase every single week. Thank you guys for sharing, for allowing others to join our audience, to allow them to actually hear the things that we've been talking about, not only in the Marine Corps, but especially in the history of the 1st Marine Division as they headed into Iraq in 2003. While some of you that are listening, maybe you were there with me during that time frame. It's always great to remember the things that we once did. And it's hard to believe that we are in the history books, that people actually read about the things that we, as Marines, part of the 1st Marine Division, are actually being talked about in some of the history books for the things that we did. A reminder to join us on our Facebook page, The Quarterdeck with Gunny Signs, for our weekly posts that are on there, as well as if you have any questions or anything that you would like to leave on our Facebook page, just go ahead and leave us a message there and we'll get back to you as fast as we can to go ahead and get you an answer to that question. And also, if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please feel free to send us your information and we will go ahead and contact you and get you involved in our podcast so we can have you here as a guest. Here's to everybody having a great rest of the week. Enjoy your Thursday. Get your rooms cleaned because I'm pretty sure they're filthy and it's time to fill day those nasty barracks rooms. And hey, all my geo-bachelors, all my married individuals that are out there, I know that you are going to put your spouse and your kids to work and clean your house and make sure that it is field day ready and ready for inspection. Until next week, this is Miguel, the Gunny Signs, sounding Liberty Call.
Get out the bus! I do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.